Hey, what's going on, everyone, and welcome to episode 49 of the Alec Walt Show. I'm your host, Alec Walt, alongside another very special guest, and today we're talking about the National Hockey League. One of the teams that's going to be playing is the Seattle Kraken in their first ever National Hockey League game. Joining me to talk about the Seattle Kraken and more is DJ Mitchell, the host of the Morning State podcast, the lead hockey contributor for the Mayo Media Network, and the creator of the Hockey Assist Network YouTube channel. DJ, what's going on, man? I appreciate you joining me.
Of course, it's good to be back. I mean, the Seattle Kraken, it's an incredibly exciting time for hockey in general. I think that this is going to be a wildly successful experience, getting more fans hopefully into sport, as well as just it's exciting to have a team to complete the deck. You know, having 31
Yeah.
feels really, really awkward to me. I never liked it. Not that it's helped too much in the Pacific. That's been absolutely abysmal, but it never really quite fit in my opinion. So I'm happy to have Seattle join the league, and I love the name the Kraken. I know that a lot of people are a little hit or miss on the name. It's a little bit juvenile and very Pirates of the Caribbean-esque, but I love the name. But yeah, thanks for the introduction. I'll be doing a lot of hockey content this year, so I'm excited to get started though.
So, DJ, this is the second expansion draft you've seen over the last few years. Obviously, the Vegas Golden Knights were extremely successful in their first few seasons as an organization. Just based on what you saw this offseason in the expansion draft, in free agency, on the trade market, give me a grade and an overall evaluation of how the Kraken did constructing this roster.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I just gave an overall grade in general, I'd be right around a C plus. I think that they did a couple things really, really well. Number one, I think they utilized their cap in free agency extremely well, picking up guys like Johansson and others to kind of complete everything. You know, they didn't make a single trade at the expansion draft, which I'll get to, but I think that they did utilize Vanacek to get back some capital from the Capitals and stuff like that. So I think they made some savvy moves in that respect. But at the expansion draft, I would give that a D minus potentially, maybe worse. Not making a single trade, taking assets from teams and giving them right back for nothing seems really, really strange. And with Vegas doing such an exceptional job, you know, picking up extra players like Shea Theodore, who is a Norris candidate at this rate,
Yeah.
and guys like Alex Tuck, who is a 20 goal scorer. You know, it really does not look great for Seattle, but you know, I think there's more going on behind the scenes than anyone really knows. I think that some GMs just straight up said, "We're not going to talk to you. Take whoever you want. We don't care." And I genuinely think that must be the case, considering I think that Seattle has a very good analytic department with a lot of very sharp people. So I'm surprised by it, but I don't think it's entirely their fault. So yeah, I think this roster is a good roster. It's a deep roster. Their fourth line and third line should be able to compete with anyone, but their top two lines are pretty bad as far as being a top line and top pairing. So we'll get into that. But yeah, I think a C is a pretty fair grade to give them their first offseason.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about that first line. We're certainly not looking at names like Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, David Pastrnak, and Austin Matthews. According to Ryan S. Clark on Twitter, the line pairings on Sunday, the top line was Jaden Schwartz, Jared McCann, Jordan Eberle. On most Stanley Cup contending teams, those guys are about, I'd say, top six forwards, mainly more on the second line or so. But, you know, even though their offense isn't great, they do have some guys that could score 20 goals. But Schwartz, McCann, Eberle, I mean, I wouldn't say it's the best top line in the league, but they still can put the puck in the back of the net.
Certainly, and you know, it's a first year look for a lot of these guys playing with their partners, and I think that top line really will bode very well. I think it's going to be a good resurgence for a guy like Jaden Schwartz, a guy that was kind of cannibalized by Vladimir Tarasenko in St. Louis, who's a lot of what he does really well. So I think he's going to have a real chance to shine here, but I don't quite think it's going to be enough to get it done. The best part about this team, though, is that they're in the worst division in hockey. The Pacific is going to be really, really bad, and there's going to be a lot of teams that just do not have it together. So hopefully that could be their saving grace in their first season. If you go right now to like DraftKings Sportsbook or anywhere where you can place a bet, they're almost a dead coin flip to make the playoffs, and that's more indicative of the division they're in rather than them being a perennial powerhouse off the gate. And I also think that Vegas being so successful in year one has changed the odd makers' kind of perception on what these expansion drafts could be. Because in hockey, I think that myself and some other people in the community agree, goaltending really is what is going to be the driving force. And when you have two goaltenders that can get the job done consistently and share that workload, any team could be in the playoff race in that capacity. If you have bad goaltending, it's going to kill you. It killed the Sharks for
Mm-hmm.
years. It killed the Penguins last year. I think that they have two very good goaltenders, and that is what is going to give them a chance at the playoffs in year one.
Yeah, hopefully they can find a way to make it. Like you mentioned before, their division is the easiest in hockey. We'll jump into their standings and your expectations and where they spot in this division in just a few seconds. Some other names to note here on the offensive side: Marcus Johansson, Alex Wenberg, Jonas Donskoy, Ryan Donato. Of course, they're dealing with injuries to Yanni Gord and Callie Yarncroc, but it almost seems like we're seeing three second, third lines instead of really anything that's going to blow you away up top.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that strategy can work with the right goaltending and with the right coaching. I mean, Dave Hextall has come from, he was kind of the college hockey darling, goes to the Flyers, has some success, but that whole situation in general just seemed like it didn't work out. And then he goes to Toronto. So it's hard to get an exact gauge on what they're going to try to do with him. As far as what this team's going to look like. And then that's really what I'm going to be diving into on the Hockey Assist Network is just showing you like what these teams are trying to do to create
Mhm.
offense. If it's what the Maple Leafs try to do, as you mentioned, they don't have that kind of skill. You know, they can't win every game with a track meet mentality. If they try to do more what the Islanders do, I think they could be more successful. But do they have the defensemen to get that done? Do they have the forwards who can rush the ice like Pavillier and like Barzal? I'm not positive on that, so it's going to be interesting to see how they're really going to try to attack. The preseason, you never tip your hand too much. Their last preseason game, they ran pretty regular lines. So I think we have a good indication of what they'll do on the power play. I think we have a decent indication of what they'll do on the penalty kill, although I think that'll be a bit of a rotating wheel because a lot of those guys will be more of your fourth line scratch players. And
Mhm.
where they're really going to excel is just having depth in general. They don't have a lot of prospects, but what they do have is a lot of fourth line, seventh pair defenseman type players that can fit in if there's anyone that gets hurt. So they might not be as crushed by injuries. They're not going to be a team that is going to give up a ton of expected goals against when their third line's on the ice. Like you mentioned, they have depth there, but they are going to be a team that if they get into a track meet type game, they're not going to be able to keep up.
You talked about this revolving door on the penalty kill. You look at their deep, obviously their goaltending is strong, like you've mentioned. Their defense has some depth, some guys who can contribute there in the penalty kill. But a lot of the guys I've mentioned offensively are more towards the offensive side. Schwartz, McCann, Eberle, Johansson, Donato, DJ. Let's be real here. They're not going to be on the power play or 5-on-5 through an entire hockey game. There's going to be penalties. There's going to be times they need to kill a penalty. Who are some forwards you think could play a key penalty killing role for the Kraken here in 2021?
Yeah, so I just pulled up their last preseason game where they started most of their starters, not entirely. Guys like Alexiak didn't play, but most of them. The four forwards that saw the most penalty kill ice time, I think a couple of them make a lot of sense. Brandon Tanev, that seems like an easy fit. He's a checking forward, blocks a lot of shots. One of your better shot blockers is a forward. And then Riley Sheehan was the other one, which isn't too much of a surprise. He kind of had a bit of a renaissance with the Sabres and is a good defensive forward. I'm not, but I don't think he's going to be 82 game starter by any stretch of the
Yeah.
imagination. Probably neither of them should be. Then Jonas Donskoy and Wenberg. I mean, Wenberg did get some penalty kill time for the Panthers. He's a real smart player, big time playmaker, not a big shot producer. He saw some, but he's a good face-off man as well. I think he'll kind of be one of the revolving pieces. But not everyone played, as you mentioned, and some injuries. Yanni Gord's always been looked at as a really strong defensive forward. Jonas Donskoy, I think, would fit in that role, and as well as Marcus Johansson, who
Mm-hmm.
was not in that game. His metrics defensively have also been pretty good. And I do think in more of your pivotal games, guys like Jordan Everly might fit there. Another guy that plays under Barry Trotz, understands how to play a really sound defensive game, but in this matchup, they probably just didn't think it was necessary, as well as they had a ton of penalty power play time and he was on their top unit, so they may have just not been wanting to push him too hard. You can kind of see that. I think one of the interesting things is 5 of their 6 defensemen took time on the penalty kill in that last preseason game. Like I said, I think they're trying to figure it out. The Seattle Kraken do not benefit from having guys that have played on the same power play and the same penalty kill, and understanding where those players are on the ice only can happen with practice. So I do think early in the year when I'm playing on DraftKings, if I'm going to be playing against Seattle, which I think could be a fair strategy, I'm definitely going to be targeting their penalty kill because I think it'll be pretty weak to start the year.
So, just before we move to the defensive side, they were active on waivers, picked up a very strong, skilled offensive player. DJ, give us a breakdown of one of the recent transactions here for the Kraken.
Yeah, so Alexander Barrie-Boulet was always a guy that, especially in the DFS community, when he got the call up from Syracuse to Tampa, and in the playoffs when guys were out, expect Stamkos, etc., he was always a power play forward for them. When he is a guy that will may not play 20 minutes, he might only give you 14, but that 14 minutes is primarily focused on using his shot. It is a very good shot, and it's something that they're clearly lacking. Outside of Jeremy McCann and Jaden Schwartz, they really don't have a single forward that I think of as a man, this guy could score from anywhere type of player. So that's what they're getting in him. I don't know if he's really going to be super fantasy relevant. He might be worth burying in a dynasty league and seeing if maybe he can strike lightning. Um, but I'm not entirely convinced that it's something that you need to worry about right off the cuff. I do think he'll fit in on their top power play, but he might not get the minutes to be extremely valuable. He also is pretty bad defensively, as I mentioned. Well, it's hard to know because he just never really put in that role with Tampa, who had maybe the best defensive third line in hockey. So they
Yeah.
just never needed to. So it's hard to really know what they're going to do with him. But I think that give it a couple. I don't think he'll play game one. He's just got signed over. I do think he'll end up making their roster, I think he's could be a real good fit for them in any capacity, especially because they're going to need to find goal scorers, and someone just handed it over. So
Yeah.
it's a great fit for them. I'm really impressed by the move.
So let's go to the defensive side of the ice. Their top line defenseman, the guy they named captain, Mark Giordano. Yes, he's currently on the back nine of his career at the age of 38. But you look for leadership, you look for experience. You're not going to find a guy with much more than Giordano there on the top line for their defense.
No, I mean it's a perfect fit for him. It is kind of one of those things. I totally feel bad for the guy. He's 38. He gets this amazing opportunity, but it did feel kind of listening to him talk about leaving that Calgary locker room, it does feel pretty heart-wrenching. But I really do think that, for him, this is a great chance to cement his legacy as a Norris winner, a potential Hall of Fame type defenseman that is a bit under the radar, I think, in a lot of the NHL, especially in America, because he always played late night in Calgary. Um, to maybe get a little bit more of a stage to finish his career. I don't know if he'll be incredibly valuable, but he was on that top power play unit in their last game. I think that Vince Dunn is more of your younger guy to take over the reins maybe next year, or the year after. But this year, if you're just in a single year fantasy, Mark Giordano still has the rate stats to be extremely valuable, and he's going to have the role. He's going to log a ton of minutes, and he's going to have opportunity on the top power play to get the job done in a very weak Pacific division. So I'm still a big fan of him, but I think, as I've already hinted at, maybe a bigger fan of Vince Dunn and what he could turn into, because I think he is one of the most valued assets in all of fantasy right now. And especially if you're in a dynasty league or a keeper league, you really should be trying to get this guy and stashing him for later, because if not this year, it's going to be next year where he takes over.
So when I look at their defense, I mean, I see 8 guys potentially who could have a role in this team next year. Maybe not specifically fantasy assets, but Hayden Fleury, Jamie Alexiak, Dennis, I think his first name Cholowski, Adam
Yep.
Larson,
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy Lauzon. I mean, there's a lot of dudes there. They got some depth here in this lineup. I mean, yes,
Yeah.
their offense is still a work in progress. Their goaltending is solid, but not many teams can confidently say they have 8 NHL caliber defensemen in their organization. The Kraken can say that heading into their first game of the season.
Right. And if it doesn't work out with this team and you get to the trade deadline and the Olympic break, and there's an avenue to make some trades, I think that's really where they can shine. And defensemen, even like a Susie, could go for a third, second round pick. And that is going to be really vital for a team that has really no farm system and no prospect pool outside of Matt Beniers. So they do have an option of, I think, moving some of those assets, as well as trying to get the future going now. It's something that Vegas did very, very well, getting some of these picks. I mean, look at Ryan Suzuki, who they ended up flipping for Max Pacioretty, stuff like that. So if they're not able to start that process now, it's going to hurt them in the future when they're competitive.
Looking at this defense, obviously Lauzon came from the Boston Bruins. Cholowski, who was kind of in Detroit. I mean, Detroit obviously isn't a great team right now, kind of faded. Hayden Fleury's coming off an injury. Who do you think amongst those guys could really emerge as a solid defenseman here in Seattle?
A guy like Fleury, I think, is a bit more fantasy relevant in general. So if you're talking about a guy that might put out more points, I think he's the logical pick there. But I think I really like Derby Lauzon as a defender. I think that he could
Really?
really log a lot of tough minutes for them. The thing about hockey that I think is coming even more to the forefront as of late is just how important the character of a team is. When you get a guy out of that locker room in Boston, it seems to work where they're going to come in and work hard and want to get the job done. And I do think there's some weight to that. Getting a guy like Jeremy Lauzon, who was on a Boston team that was really, really good, gave him a bigger role in the playoffs, and he seemed to do well with it. He was not one of the anchors that held them back in the playoffs, I would say. So, yeah, I think it's a good fit for them. And they have, I mean, their defense is not going to be what hurts them. It's not their Achilles heel. It's just scoring goals. So I'm not really worried about them in general. I think all those guys you mentioned should be on the opening night roster. It looks like they like Giordano with Fleury. Cholowski is the only one that you mentioned that I don't think will make it on opening night. I think it looks like Alexiak and Larson will be the second pairing, and then Lauzon with Dunn. Cholowski is a former first-round pick, a lot of offensive upside, but just never really got it done in Detroit, and got taken over by Filip Hronek. So I think it's kind of a logical departure for them. But he has a ton of talent, so I do hope that he can maybe find a role there, and if not, maybe end up being a guy that they trade and put him somewhere else where he can find that chance.
So we've talked a lot about goaltending. It's taken nearly 18 minutes for us to really dive into this, but you look at Philip Grubauer, Chris Driedger. Grubauer last year finished with a 1.95 goals against. Driedger was a 2.07. I mean, from a goaltending pairings perspective, I mean, that's one of the best pairings in the league. Yes, Grubauer, yes, probably more the number one in this situation, but that near 50-50 split is absolutely spectacular if you're the Kraken.
I mean, and I would say that they got Philip Grubauer for about exactly market price. I didn't think that they overpaid him at 59 or 5.9 million a year. I don't think that was an egregious overpayment. I think they just outbid Colorado, and Grubauer went for the money, which I think is fair for him to do at this stage of his career. At 29,
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to get that massive 6-7 year contract anywhere else. Chris Driedger is more of your good story maybe situation. Former third round pick in Ottawa, never quite figured it out until a couple of years ago in Florida, and he was kind of looked at as this guy in 2019, 2020, where it's like, okay, is this for real? This guy had almost a 940 save percentage. Who's this guy? He was just in the ECHL last year, a very Jordan Binnington-esque feeling. And then last year was their best goaltender. They paid Bobrovsky all the money in the world, but when you have the best goalie prospect in hockey, and Spencer Knight, he became expendable. They couldn't let go of Bobrovsky to save their life because Seattle was not taking on that contract. So this is a guy that I do think has Jordan Binnington type skill, and he might even be better. I mean, it's hard to know because he hasn't quite had the same length of time quite yet. But I like Driedger a lot to be a really, really sound backup for them. But Philip Grubauer is a bona fide number one. And even in the prospect pool, if you will, I think Joey Cord is not a terrible guy to have coming off the pine if you need him to. He looked awesome in Ottawa last year. He really is more of your storybook type situation. And from Boston himself, I'm just realizing looking at his page. So yeah, I'm a big fan of all three of those guys. I think that they're going to be what could get this team to that next level. And you go to the playoffs, and you never know. We saw Toronto lose to Montreal last year. Montreal on that run. Good goaltending can get that done. So that's what could give them those heroics that we saw with Vegas.
So looking at the Pacific Division right now, again, not the best in the NHL. Vegas is looking like the favorite. Vancouver, after making a humongous trade with the Arizona Coyotes, look like they could possibly be that second or third place team with the Edmonton Oilers. But the Ducks are rebuilding. The Kings are rebuilding. The Flames just lost their captain and underperformed, in my opinion, last year. The Sharks, you can also put them in that rebuilding category. In your opinion, how many wins do you think this team can win, knowing their division's a little bit easier? And, what are you going to project for this Seattle Kraken team in 2021?
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll definitely be sub 100. I think they'll probably hit right around the 94 point mark. Is I think fair, however you want to do the math on the wins and overtime losses, etc. I think 94 points is a really fair and accurate depiction of what this team could produce. if they could get a little bit streaky here or there and get it done, I don't see them getting over 100 points. And I know that Vegas also agree with me on that. Yeah, Vegas is clear number one. I think Edmonton could compete. I really do think Edmonton could compete at number one though with Vegas. I think that Edmonton is really underappreciated. They have a lot of young talent that I think is going to shine through this year. But really, what they need to do is have Leon Draisaitl actually take over as the number two or the number one, number 1B, if you will, center, and not need McDavid to help him. Um,
Yeah.
but I really do think that the Oilers could give them a bit of a run. But those two teams I put a bit above everyone else. Puljujarvi, Yamamoto, those young guys could get them there. As far as the 3 spot, it's really going to come down to Seattle and Vancouver. I don't really see anyone else competing. Calgary, I could talk myself into. I really could. I don't
They
think
have
that
all the talent to do
I
it.
don't think they've been impressive with how they've fallen apart. And last year,
Yeah.
just I couldn't believe they couldn't find a way in the Canadian division. It makes absolutely no sense. Really, what it all comes down to for them is, can Sean Monahan either give them a big return or can he figure it out? He has gone from I mean, if you look at like a guy like Mark Scheifele and Sean Monahan, you kind of see a similar trajectory. And then Monahan just fell off a cliff. He went from a 30 goal scorer to uh, a guy that you really don't even think about. He's not a fantasy asset anymore. I know he's going undrafted in a lot of leagues. So that's really what it comes down to. Do they have number one center? They're my favorite to get Jack Eichel, just candidly enough. So if they can get a
Really?
guy like Jack Eichel, I think that they have the right pieces, and I think that they have the general manager that knows he's on ropes to go out there and get him. So, yeah, I mean, Brad Treliving has been there for a while. A guy like Daryl Sutter at coach, I mean, I'm not a big fan of the old school hockey mentality, but it can get you wins. And I think that a team like them that has been so disorganized, it's a good fit for now. Um, they go out and get Blake Coleman. I think they're a lot better. Like Calgary and Vancouver are very similar with what their teams are. They go out and they make some splashes, but how much better are they really? And it really comes down to those top players. Is Elias Pettersson going to come back and be a number one center in this league at the age of 22? Is he going to carry you? If either of those teams falter, Seattle's going to have no problem getting into the playoffs as far as the top 3 in the Pacific.
Well, I would definitely love to see the Kraken make a run here in their first season. Again, there's still some there's still some questions that need to be answered in regards to their lineup, especially once a few players get off the injured reserve and are contributors for the Kraken. But it should be an exciting first year in Seattle. I cannot wait to see the Kraken take the ice Tuesday night against the Vegas Golden Knights. DJ, before I let you walk, how can our listeners keep in touch with you on social media, follow all your channels, and link your podcasts?
We have the Morning Skate podcast, which I've been doing now for a number of years with Matt Moody. We have a Discord. We have a million different things going on in there. That is primarily focused on DraftKings, FanDuel, that type of daily fantasy hockey. We have all of the lines. So if you're like, oh, I wonder who's playing with this guy, we'll be tweeting them out, making sure you're getting all the information, and in our Discord talking about all of our strategy. I have the Hockey Assist Network, which my very basic strategy, to sum it all up in a very brief, is to make hockey more for visual learners, try to show it rather than just talk about it. A lot of the analytics, the community at least kind of misses that. So that's the very basic of what that is, but there's a ton going on, lots of videos, lots of GIFs. I am actually doing to start the year. If you have any goal or play that you want me to try to make a GIF for, you can tweet at the Hockey Assist Network and I'll try to get it to you. And then the Mayo Media Network, wearing the hat right now, that is going to be, I'm going to be right now, Monday through Friday, 7 to 10 minutes on the best and my favorite bets. So that'll be your line bets. So like if I'm like tonight, I really like Tampa minus 200, stuff like that. So really easy to try to bet in that capacity. So I'm going to be covering all different angles. So anything you like, as long as you like gambling, come on down.
Awesome. Well, DJ, thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to join me on the Alec Walt Show.
Yeah, and if you want to find my stuff, I'll make sure that I tweeted at Walt today, so just go through there at DJ_Mitchell94, at Assist Hockey on Twitter, and at Morning Skate Pod. Easy enough.
Cool. All right, man. Well, that's be it for this episode of the Alec Walt Show. I'm Alec Walt alongside DJ Mitchell. What are your expectations for the Seattle Kraken in year one? How many points do you think they'll earn at the end of their first season? Feel free to comment that below. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Down the Block Sports for more of my exclusive content. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we will see you very soon.